Welcome back to our conversation about how is it that we are fed by God. We're all hungry. God made us that way. We all were made by God for God. And yet how is it that He feeds us? Because can't we be fed in other ways than the Eucharist? Last week when we got together in week 4 of this series, we talked about how God wants to feed us through the Eucharist, but every one of us knows that we have friends who are fed in the other churches that they go to, and perhaps even some of us watching today have been fed in other ways. This is Father Mark Toups, a priest of the Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux, and if I were going to be honest with you, I would have to admit that I went through a series in my life. I went through a season where I was looking to be fed through the Word. I was looking for good preaching, and I have to acknowledge that God did feed me in that way. So one of the things that we have to just be honest about if we're going to have a conversation about being fed is that it is possible for us to be fed spiritually in other ways other than the Eucharist. And for some people who read John chapter 6, they have a different interpretation on it. They actually say that the way that Jesus wants to feed us is through His Word. And so let me just acknowledge, yes, you can be fed in other ways than the Eucharist. You can be fed through great preaching and through study and through the gift of His Word. You can be fed, you can be lifted up by great music and an atmosphere of worship that really engages your heart in other ways. We can be fed in the gift of community. All of those are absolutely valid ways. And so the question I would have is, knowing that we can be fed in those ways, what does that mean about us being fed in the Eucharist? And what would Jesus want to say about that? Well, I think He would say this: you don't have to die for those other ways. You don't have to die in order to feed us with your teaching. You don't have to die in order to feed us with music, and you don't have to die to feed us with community. On all the things that we've talked about in this series, the Eucharist is the only one that actually requires His death, His full commitment. The Catholic Church believes and professes and always has that the Eucharist is a representation of what Jesus gave us on the cross. We have an understanding that when Jesus gives us the gift of Holy Thursday, the night before He died, it's connected to the gift of Good Friday, the day that He gave His life to us. And those two things come together in our Catholic understanding of the Eucharist, where we understand that the new Passover meal of Holy Thursday is connected to the new Passover lamb on Good Friday. In other words, when Jesus gives us the Eucharist, it is His presence as the new, you might say, ultimate sacrifice to the Father, the new greatest offering to the Father. And it required His death, and that is why we hold that while you can be fed in those other ways, this is the way that not only required the most from Him, but that satiates us the most. And that's a lot of stuff, I know, quickly in a couple of minutes. And if you want to learn more, you want to hear the rest of this sermon, you can go to our homily page on our website, htdiocese.org. Just click on the homilies and listen button. There's more that you can learn about how Jesus wants to feed us in the Eucharist and how it relates to the other ways that we can be fed. The most important thing is for us to know that He wants to feed us and that the Eucharist is a pure gift to us. Let's continue to open up our hearts. Let's continue to allow Him to feed the hunger in our heart. God bless you.